So Governor John Kasich was in Niles last night at the Lincoln Day dinner. Second time I've attended that event, and I usually go when there's a good speaker. Rob Portman was there 2 years ago, and for some reason I missed it last year. But John Kasich was there, and I'll tell you what, folks, I'm telling you, you can be proud that you have a governor that really has a grip on what's going on in this state, and a guy that is a very inspirational speaker. And he comes from a very humble background, and he started off by telling, and kind of related to talk radio, because he says his mom was just a talk radio junkie over in McKees Rock, Pennsylvania, and of course they would listen to the big station in Pittsburgh. And his mom would go from room to room listening to all these radio stations, and she's listening to the radio stations, and she would always try to inspire John. And John says, we were one of those folks that really maybe had a luxury. We had a telephone in the kitchen to where you could see the hands going around so you could keep a track of how long you'd been on a long-distance call. And he said, we obviously had a luxury because Mom and Dad had a telephone in the bedroom. And his mom is listening to the radio station, and she's listening to this conversation that's getting heated between this commentator and a caller. And she's saying, Johnny, you got to hear this. Where are you, Johnny? Where are you, Johnny? And she's searching the house for John Kasich, can't find John Kasich, finally opens up the bedroom, looks in the bedroom, and there's John. And he is on the phone, and he's the guy that's talking to the announcer on the big radio station in Pittsburgh. And he's talking about, his mom and dad and how they came up, and his grandfather who worked in the coal mine, and his grandfather so poor that he would take his lunch to work and maybe bring half of it home because they needed the food at home. Come up very humble background, but told some really, really great stories. And then he had an opportunity to get into the meat and potatoes of what he's doing. First of all, when he came in, he was coming from another event, and the reporters all met him. And as he was coming in, kind of interesting. He's a slight guy, and no tie, just kind of loose and very casual. And as he comes in, he's talking about jobs. And he comes back and he says, let's reflect back on where we were when I came in. He said, we had an $8 billion deficit. My budget director and I, we started looking at Ohio 3 years before we ran for the governorship. He says, when I saw this $8 billion tax deficit that we had here in the state of Ohio, he said, I knew that we, obviously had to do something about that. We couldn't default. So he came back and he killed the death tax. And he says, the death tax on business, and sometimes he says, you inherit a business and you find out that you can't afford to keep the company. So they killed this death tax, and he says they cut the taxes for the small businesses by 50%. And he says that is a lot of money for people up to $250,000. They killed that death tax by 50%, allowing a lot of small businesses to keep the family business. So in that first year, Kasich not only balanced the budget, but as of today, Ohio has a $1.5 billion surplus. Now, that is a job well done. And I think that I don't care. One of the things that John Kasich does a lot when he's speaking is that he refers to Democrats in the room a lot. And Harry Michel was there, and Harry Michel's name was mentioned more than anybody. It's just a way of John Kasich disarming people and being able to bring attention to the opposite. And he does that a lot with Capri Cafaro. But Harry Michel was there, and Harry continually was referred to last night. And, it was like they're old friends. And I was looking over at Harry Michel, and, he's a loyal Democrat. But I have to think that Harry Michel was probably saying, you know what, I'm kind of proud that this guy's our governor. I'm thinking that Harry Michel is sitting there going, you know what, this guy's in charge. He's getting a job done here. And after all, what's it about? It's about the quality of life here in Ohio and our friends and neighbors being back to work. And he talked to John Kasich, the guy, you can just tell when you can see the guy's soul, and you can tell that the guy really is more than just about big business and Republicans and his own legacy. He talked about jobs, and he said work is self-confidence. Work gives you the opportunity to be a role model. And he says, a job is a moral issue, and we need jobs. And then he started talking about the facts. I love it when people speak, and when I speak, I always try to bring in some facts, too, because I think that you've got to have some basis for what you're talking about. And Kasich says, when he came into office, during the Strickland administration, they had lost 350,000 private sector jobs. 350,000 jobs that had disappeared. Ohio was 48th in job creation. I wonder who's 49th and 50th. West Virginia, maybe, and Mississippi. But Ohio was so down the road. 48th in job creation when he came into office. Since he came into office in January of 2011, Ohio has been the number one job creator in the Midwest. Ohio went from 48th in job creations to the number one job creator in those 3 years. Ohio is now the number one job creator in the 3 years that he has been in office. They have created 238,000 private sector jobs. And we are now 7th in the nation in job creation. Now, you go back and you listen to the facts there, and you have to say that John Kasich turned this state around. And I'm you can look at Scott Walker, John Kasich, and other governors out here who have done a great job. But when you think about where this state was, and go back and just remember those numbers that I gave you, 48th in job creation, and since 2011, we are the number one job creator in the Midwest and growing. The unemployment rate is still high because we are coming from a very, very difficult spot. He killed the death tax. He now has taken the budget from an $8 billion deficit to a $1.5 billion surplus. So that is a hell of a legacy when you think about the governor of the state of Ohio. And I look at other people out here that may be running. This guy Fitzgerald, I don't even know much about him or anything like that, but I'm thinking to myself, he may just want to say, I'm going to fold the tent right now, because you've got a guy out here that has turned the Buckeye State around, and we have come back. There's only a few states like Texas that are still ahead of us here. All right, we'll talk more about this. There was a lot last night covered, but I come out of this, and I was just very proud that this man is the governor of the state of Ohio, and for a lot of reasons. And it's not just the job creation. I'll tell you a little bit more about what John Kasich thinks. We'll take your phone calls as we get them to, and you can always